The lack of curiosity on the West to think that they cannot learn something from this great country and 5,000 years of tradition is a little disturbing to me.
One of the stories that I really like that has emerged this year is the story of Simu. And he was born in Harbin. He started off at a Canadian television show that was very popular. And anyways, he became the Marvel superhero Shang that we saw debut this year. And
I feel that China's soft power is so evident if you can get beyond sometimes the big cities. And I think that country can naturally seduce anyone. And all we need to do is create the opportunities for more genuine interaction in this way.
I am Han Bowen from the Oxford China Forum, and I will be hosting the event today. The Oxford China Forum was founded in 2013 under University of Oxford China Center. We are one of the largest China forums in Europe, having hosted more than 100 guests, including former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, former Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, and former British Ambassador to China, Christopher Hum. So today's guests are Mr. Brian Linden, founder of the Linden Center, Yuan, a culture and travel brand based in Yunnan, China. And then is Cyrus Janssen, manager and business consultant. He has lived and worked 10 years in China and runs a YouTube channel on promoting understanding between China and the West. So the first question I want to ask our guests is, what motivated you to do what you are doing about China? So please just give us a brief introduction of what you do and what made you want to do it.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me and having us here today. We started the center in 2004, and we started it really in response to the idea of China's soft power. And we felt the lack of curiosity and interest in China that I had experienced outside of China. I was based in Beijing from 1984 to 88 and worked for CBS News there. And I left and went back to Stanford to work on my PhD, and I traveled the world working on projects. But I found that most places didn't have the same passion that I did for China. And in 2004, my wife and I decided that we wanted to address this issue and try to make some difference. And we came to China, sold our home, gave up our jobs, and came here to create what we hoped would be a 24/7, almost Aspen Institute or Davos. And we wanted to create an intellectual platform that would take intellectual exchange away from the big cities in China and allow people to get out into the countryside and see a China that we felt was a little more connected with the 4,970-year history and not just the recent 30 years of a miraculous economic growth. So that was really why we came back and set up the center.
Thank you, Brian. Great story.
You're welcome.
Okay, Cyrus, please.
Yeah, hello, everyone. My name is Cyrus Janssen. I'm an American expat that's been living around the world for the past 15 years. 10 of those years were spent in China. And a couple of years ago, exactly 2 years ago, I started a YouTube channel because I wanted to share my experiences of living in China, traveling extensively in the country. And my goal with my YouTube channel is to hopefully form a better relationship between the United States and China. The United States is the country that I'm from. It's the country that I love. And China is also the same. It's also a country that I have a great passion for. And I found that there was a lot of misunderstandings happening. And my hope is that through sharing these stories that we are able to basically bridge this gap between the two countries. And that is the goal that I work on YouTube, is trying to help people understand the cultural nuances between these two countries.
Thank you, Cyrus. All right, thank you everyone for coming and sharing your story. So firstly, I want to talk about interaction with Chinese people. So I think all of you have Chinese and international audiences. So I want to know from your perspective, from your point of view, have there been any cases when you think cultural differences led to misunderstandings between you and the Chinese people, or between Chinese people and non-Chinese people?
Many Chinese people are very curious about America. And one of the interesting things is, there is this stereotype, for example, that, oh, you're from America, you must have a very big house, you must drive a very fancy car, you must live in, Hollywood. You look at these stereotypes that are often portrayed. And I said, no, I'm from a middle-class family. I live in a normal neighborhood. And that is the real America, is that there is a very big disparity of what you see. This is one of the things that I noticed, is that I wanted people to understand a little bit more about America and, and try to answer some of those stereotypes. And it's the same way as well. When I told my friends in Florida that I was moving to China, they had asked me, when somebody had asked me, oh, China, it's still a third world country. If you move there, is there going to be electricity in your apartment? This was in 2007. I pulled up an image of the Shanghai skyline, and I said, well, look at these buildings that China has built. I'm pretty sure that they have electricity in there. So even, I think, both ways, sometimes we really look at a lot of, stereotypes. And that's why it's so important to connect with real people and hear stories and really experience it for yourself.
When I came over here, especially in '84, I found that most people felt that America was very, very wealthy. And at the time, 95% of China's population was under the World Bank poverty level. What I've tried to do here with our projects is really try to level, make sure that everyone is equal. And it's hard for me as a foreigner. I have 150 staff, and it's hard for me to be very strict with any of them. I still feel quite honored to be here in China. And it's hard for me to ever get too direct and too critical of anyone on my staff. So what I'm finding is that I'm often trying to exemplify what Cyrus said as well, is this idea that not all of us in America come from wealthy families or everything, and that we're willing to get our hands dirty. And what I've discovered is that has been a real good model for both for inspiring my team, but also gaining the trust of the villagers around us, who we're in very rural areas. And when they see me out there getting work, getting all dirty and stuff like today, they just love to see that. And it builds a trust that I feel that is very hard to do sometimes for foreigners in China, who are often restricted to office buildings and, like these villas and everything. So it's been a real fun experience for me. And I think this has built the trust that has allowed up for us to grow here in rural Yunnan.
So now let's talk about the trend of Chinese soft power and Chinese cultural influence, both in China and abroad. So I want to ask the guests, do you feel in your work and your life that China's cultural or soft power influence has been increasing or decreasing? And has there been any change in that part? And if there is a change, how has that affected your work and your life? What about Cyrus? What do you think?
I think when we're looking at China, I do feel that they are influencing, with their culture around the world. One of the stories that I really highlighted early on was, for example, the emergence of Douyin, which is the Chinese version of TikTok. And of course, TikTok has become one of the biggest apps in the world, very popular outside of China. There's two versions. You have Douyin, which is in mainland China, TikTok abroad. And that has really shaped the future of social media, even here in the West. And I think that's quite interesting to hear. Many people didn't know initially that TikTok was from China. It was developed by ByteDance, which is based in Beijing. And I think it was quite amazing because you started seeing these Chinese culture. China has a very vibrant social media scene. And, you started seeing the popularity of the short form video, and now how that has transformed other American platforms. It was just quite amazing. So we can talk a little bit more about that later, but it's something that I'm very interested in, is always the tech side. And again, I see China really leading in many ways with their, cultural influence.
Okay, thank you very much. And Brian, you work in the cultural and travel industry in China, and I think Xilin Yuan is very much focused on Chinese traditional culture and minority culture. So what do you think about this topic?
Because I haven't left China for the last 4 years, and even before that, we've been here for 17 years now, and I would return only for 1 month a year, if that. So my I guess, concept of soft power right now is really vis-a-vis the expat community that is already here in China. So often what I'm discovering is many of them are not venturing beyond the Sanlituans and the Tianzifangs and the Huanzhaishangs or whatever. And what I feel that we're trying to do is give them a safe platform where they can escape the big cities and come out and have a deeper experience. We're not only doing that for travelers, we're also, pre-COVID, we were setting up long-term programs for the children of America's leaders. Sidwell Friends, one of the top high schools in America, we set up their 4-month program in a small village here in Yunnan on one of our sites. And what that allowed us to do is it allowed us to have an impact on these young children, 17, 18, who would be going on to Ivy League schools and become future leaders in America. Many of them, after 4 months with us, would leave China with tears in their eyes. They had been completely changed by the experience in a small village here because of the friendships they developed and the relationships. I feel that's the essence of soft power. I feel that China's soft power is so evident if you can get beyond sometimes the big cities. And when you come out here, what I find, we just did a mini Davos kind of thing here. What we do is people come out here and they are shocked that this is also China. And their China is Sanlitun. And once they leave Sanlitun, they see a completely different country. And I think that country can naturally seduce anyone. And all we need to do is create the opportunities for more genuine interaction in this way. And this is what we've really been trying to do.
Thank you, Brian. That's a very great story. So I want to ask you a follow-up question. So you mentioned that your audience, your customers come from both China and abroad. So I just want to ask you, what do you think is the factor that draw them to Yuan? Is it China's culture, or is it kind of just like an escape from the big city, like you said? What do you think draw them to the more rural side of China?
I believe that it definitely is not just leaving the big cities, because a lot of foreigners who leave the big cities will escape to Sanya, or they'll escape to Xiamen, or they'll escape to Guilin. So coming to a place like Dali, or where I am right now on a mountain in rural Yunnan right now, you have to make an effort. And you come here not because you're going to be hanging around a swimming pool. You come here because of the cultural challenges that you will face, by being out here with us. Every day we take people out into the villages. We partner with the villages. So the villagers are financial partners as well. So this allows us to have almost like a family. This week, every night this week, I have been at a family's house eating dinner. And this is what it is. And every one of our guests can come with us. And that really is what I find as people come here, because they can't touch these kind of experiences anymore in the big cities. And what I find is it's really hard for them to have a safe, what they feel a secure or safe or convenient platform like this, to have that window into a deeper, I think, the richness of China's culture.
Thank you very much. It's very fascinating. I would love to visit myself, like just hearing how you describe it when I have the chance. So Cyrus, I also want to ask a follow-up question for you on Chinese culture. I noticed that in your videos, you mentioned many times that sometimes the differences in lifestyle or even politics between China and the West can actually be traced back to cultural difference. If, like as you and other people said, there is an increasing influence of Chinese culture, both in China and around the world, do you think the misunderstanding about that would reduce? Or do you think maybe promoting Chinese culture would be a good way to just kind of bridge China and the West?
Yeah, I think, for myself, I'm always trying to promote, I think we need to promote both cultures. I think that there's a lot of aspects of American culture that are, really wonderful. I think that, and especially when you're an American living in China and experiencing, we like to share our culture. And for example, we were chatting with Brian earlier, and he's in his hotel, and he said, just 20 feet away from him, his staff is, building a Christmas tree, and he's working with them to do that. I mean, he's sharing kind of this Western culture. And I think, as far as the Chinese culture as well, I mean, I've had some interactions. For example, when I was visiting family in California, and we went to a really nice restaurant, and everybody got a certain dish. You get the pork, you get the beef, you get the fish. And I said, hey guys, why don't we do this China style? Let's put it in the middle. Let's each, let's all share a little bit about this. This is, family style. And they were like, wow, this is a great way to eat, because we can all try everybody's dish. And I said, yeah, that's exactly how we eat in China, where, you're not limited to just one portion. And I think it's quite an interesting thing, just these nuances between the different cultures that we have in the world. And I often say, for example, that there's a lot of a lot of the interactions that we have, or these misconceptions, really boil back down to cultural differences. One of the biggest ones that we see, for example, is I'm going to talk about something that is very very hot topic in America right now, which is gun control. We know in America, for example, there's a tremendous amount of guns in society, and that is a fear that many people have, is safety. And I think from in China's perspective, I've had many people tell me, in China there's no guns in society. That is a level of safety that they enjoy. That is a level of freedom that they enjoy. And meanwhile, in America, many people would actually feel the opposite. They'd say, well, I really want to have this value. The Second Amendment, the right to have a gun, is a very important American value to me, and I prefer it this way. So you just have a cultural difference there. I don't think people in China are envious of America's situation, that they can own a gun. I don't think people in America would be envious of China's situation. But it's really important to understand that, people from both sides would be able to say, I like my way. This is our culture. And it's just really important to understand that nuance.
Yeah, definitely. I think understanding each other and understanding the difference is definitely very important. So now I want to talk about Chinese popular culture, like entertainment, music, movie, art, video games, or something like that.
One of the stories that I really like that has emerged this year is the story of Simu. And he was born in Harbin, in the 1980s, and at the age of 6, he came to Canada. And I live full time in Vancouver, Canada. Now, Simu, he started off at a Canadian television show that was very popular. And anyways, he became the Marvel superhero, Shang, that we saw debut this year. And I thought that was just an amazing thing for Marvel Entertainment. They have made superheroes from around the world in different stories, and they highlighted a Chinese superhero. And it really, actually, the way that became a reality is that Simu on Twitter about 6 years ago tweeted to Marvel, and he said, hey guys, when are we going to make something about China? When are we going to make, when are you going to feature, how about you feature somebody like me? And then that tweet actually was the catalyst to him actually becoming, China's first, modern superhero, that was debuted in Marvel and obviously in television screens across America. And I think it's a great thing, because he's a great representative. He's obviously, Chinese. He's born in Harbin. It's a great story. And kind of an interesting thing as well, my wife and I support some orphans, from Beijing, and many of these orphans have been adopted to families in America. And it's truly amazing, the work that these orphanages are doing in Beijing. And anyways, one of the children that we had sponsored from the early days, he lives now in Tennessee with his family. And it was incredible because we sent him a Christmas present, and we sent him the Marvel superhero, Shang. And he was adopted by Caucasian family, and the boy opened it up and he said, look, mom, it's Chinese. It's a Chinese superhero, just like me. I'm from China. And it's a really touching thing as well, because we see these parents that we stay in contact with, and they're so grateful for their son that is now part of their family, and they're also trying to do their best to to say, look, you are Chinese, you need to learn this culture as well, and you are going to always be Chinese. So I think these are some really great ways. And it was having myself, I'm married to a Chinese woman. We have 3 children, obviously mixed racial children. So we very much always want to teach them, look, you're half American, you're half Chinese, you need to understand both cultures. You should be proud of both cultures. And that's where I think it's really great job to Marvel Studios for highlighting this, and having a actor from mainland China become very big on the screen here in America and around the Western world.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always important to remember your roots and learn about your culture. Yeah. So Brian, in your experience living and working in China, what are some Chinese popular culture that you find interesting, or that is worth promoting to the West, or maybe already famous in the West?
I guess I would have 2 things that I really I love that have changed my life here. And one is WeChat. I am a big fan. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Instagram. I don't have any of those things, but I could not live without WeChat. I have not carried cash. I have not carried a renminbi note for 2 years now. Life is so easy with WeChat. And it's just is the first thing you do is you meet somebody and you share your WeChat. And it is just incredible. I find it to be one of the most convenient tools I've ever come across. And then the second thing would be, I just am amazed by the high-speed rail. I mean, life has changed so much because of this. And I just wish in some way we in the West would embrace the openness, how that the freedom that comes with being able to travel so comfortably and always on time. I mean, never even a minute late. I travel, I don't like to fly. So I get on the train in Dali and 12 hours later, I'm in Shanghai and it's not a minute late. And to me, this is just amazing. You travel 4,000 kilometers and it's just perfect timing. You sit in seats that are comfortable. You're drinking Starbucks coffee from the cafe. It's just an incredible experience. So I wish we had that in the States.
The next topic, I want to ask our guest about your perception, or what do you think the Western people's perception of Chinese culture is, like both positively and negatively? Some Western people that you have met, what are their opinion on Chinese culture and why they like it or not like it? Let's start with Cyrus.
Yeah, I'd like to take this and talk something a little bit more about my work on YouTube and kind of some of the videos that I've done, because I feel, in the West, we have a very big misconception of China. We don't understand, really these cultural nuances, and we tend to have some very negative stereotypes. Now, there is no doubt about it that the West perception of China has been declining over the past few years. And it's been very interesting. I'm actually on a 40-day visit back to America, my hometown. I'm actually in Orlando, Florida right now. This is the first time I've been back home in 4 years. And it's been amazing because every day I'm going out and I'm telling people about my work. So I say I'm a YouTuber. I'm, working on, building a better relationship between the United States and China. And a lot of things that I hear, the initial feedback sometimes is, well, doesn't China want to take over America? Isn't China trying to, make America fail? Do they want to take over our democracy? Doesn't China want to make us all communists? And I say, no, that's really not what's happening here. And people say, well, we should decouple from China. We should not even do trade with China. And then I like to just use facts and logic. I bring up a lot of trade studies. For example, in 2020, when we look at the state of California, there's a tremendous amount, billions and billions of dollars worth of trade between the state of California and China. Because of the relationship with China, that has created over 150,000 jobs in California that are directly related to trade with China. And I think a lot of people don't realize how important, this relationship is. The United States established diplomatic relations with China 50 years ago. 2021 is the 50-year anniversary. And I think it has been a very beneficial relationship for both countries, both the United States and China. Rewind the clock 50 years ago, China was incredibly poor. China needed to have that foreign capital investment. Deng Xiaoping in the 80s, really had the vision to open up. He was working with the World Bank, asking, look, we want your advice. Come in here. How do we regulate the Chinese financial system? How do we build something that's going to be sustainable for the future decades? There's a lot of long-term strategic planning by China. China's in currently the 14th consecutive 5-year plan. Like Brian had said, the high-speed rail has been a vision for the Chinese government. And again, I think by 2035, every city in China with a population of at least 50,000 people will be connected to this high-speed rail network. We've seen how that has influenced, business in China. For example, I lived in Shanghai for 7 years. And, for example, Suzhou, which is just, 27-minute train ride away now on the high-speed rail, that makes, you could literally live in Suzhou and commute to Shanghai on a daily basis, for work if needed, but it connects those cities. And now they've become major hubs, which stimulates the local economy. And there's just a lot of positive stories that are coming from China. I was interviewing a former China executive, and I said, what is one thing you want the world to know about China? And he said, I want people to know that right now in China, people are sitting at a Starbucks working on their laptops. Mothers and fathers are getting their children ready and sending them to school. People are going on holiday. People are living normal lives in China and are not really worried about politics. We sometimes let politics really get in the way of too many things. And I think this is why soft culture and soft power is so influential, because if we dial it back down to things like movies and food and cultural things. This is how we start making connections. And exactly like Brian is doing at his hotel, if you have foreigners that are traveling to this very unique place in China, understanding the culture, the scenery, they get to see a very different side of China. When I start telling people these stories, they're like, wow, Cyrus, I really appreciate your insights. And because it's not what we hear on the news daily, and this is something that I want people to understand. I don't think China's government's perfect. I don't think that there is a perfect government in the world. I think that there's many things that, the American and the Chinese government can improve on. But I'm one for dialogue. I'm one for engagement. And this is something that I'm really wanting to see more of between our two countries.
And I think, yes, definitely China and America could both benefit and learn from each other. That's how we make the world better. Okay.
Absolutely.
Brian, so when non-Chinese people come to Linden, do they experience a culture shock there at your place? And what might they like or dislike about the culture there?
I don't feel that they have a culture shock. And I think that further what Cyrus said is I partner with the government on every one of my projects. So we have 6 projects currently, and we've chosen to go slowly because every project we are kind of community developers. So we come into the community, we do education, we try to do things like microfinance, we do all these various aspects. My hotel is my social enterprise. And I tell the governments when they invest in us very clearly that this is what we do. But being partners with them, it also enables me to participate in all these high-level meetings. And I think that many of us don't realize that through organizations like the Zhengxie and different things, it's an amazing process, the way the government interacts with the local people. The voices are being heard. They're just being heard in a slightly different way. I had a meeting with the government 3 or 4 days ago, and every one of the participants who came had to speak for 10 to 15 minutes. They had to share their views, positive or negative. And the local government official, who was a very high-ranking official, sat there for 3 hours and took notes. He just sat there and wrote them down. And he asked questions after every one of them gave their talks. And this kind of attention is amazing because many of these people who shared their feelings represented small communities within the prefecture. What I would like to say is that in some ways, the voices are being heard. And often what I get from the West is that the common people are not being heard. And I don't think that is true. I spend everyone I speak to, just as Cyrus said, politically, they are fine because there's so much optimism. And that whenever there's anything negative that is happening, they usually have a venue through which they can report to the next person up, and that person will report to the highest level to affect change. So it's not a perfect system, but it is not as negative as how the West portrays it as well. And my growth, my whole existence is because of the Chinese government. And I find them to be the best partners I could have in pursuing these kind of more social focused projects.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I had a similar experience, Brian. I once worked for an environmental NGO in China, and we did many appeals to the local governments, and they do actually hear about this. So
They do.
yeah, so yes, I definitely think that sometimes in the West, the generalization, the stereotype about Chinese government just as very much close at all, that is very much not true, definitely. So Brian, I want to hear your opinion on, because like there's been some say that there's been a traditional culture renaissance almost in China, that Chinese people are becoming more and more interested in Chinese culture, including traditional culture, minority culture. So do you see that trend in Linden? And how do you see that Chinese people and foreign peoples interest in Chinese culture could change positively or negatively in, say, around 3 to 5 years?
I feel still a little bit pessimistic. And like Cyrus, I have a Chinese wife. My wife is third generation Chinese American. So she's born and raised in San Francisco. My two sons are in the States and they are biracial. Part of the reason we did the project was to expose them to their Chinese cultural tradition and heritage. But I'm a little concerned still. I see a country like China, even in the smallest places, open and willing to learn. Tonight I had a talk about Kobe Bryant with a little boy here in a village of 50 people, 60 people, and he just loves Kobe Bryant. They're open, they're aware of what is happening. And I just feel that unfortunately I grew up in a pretty generic lower middle class family in the States, in Chicago. And I don't see any curiosity, beyond what's happening with the sports teams. And this to me is something that I'm really worried about, is maybe I just don't see that same drive or passion to learn and be exposed and open. And I don't know, Cyrus, I've been away so long from the States, so maybe I have a fairly negative view, but I just look back to when I was younger. And my whole reason for being in China is because I couldn't find China on a map when I was cleaning carpets in a professor's home. Those people who I grew up with, many of them probably still couldn't find China on a map or probably name a single Chinese person. And I'm worried that that type of 优越感 is something that I find to be a little frightening. And the lack of curiosity on the West to think that they cannot learn something from this great country and 5,000 years of tradition is a little disturbing to me. So I'm a little bit pessimistic.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to ask a follow-up question for Brian. So given what you just said and your experience of obviously very successful cultural influence in China, what would be the advice you might give to Chinese people, Chinese companies, or Chinese government if they wish to just promote more interest or understanding of China abroad?
You know what, I often will say this, is that I would love China to really derive its soft power, not solely from its last 30 years of economic this miracle that has occurred here, but also to reinvestigate, re-explore the previous 4,970 years, and to realize that there is so much that can be shared. I mean, I can talk to some group here in China and they don't know who Wang Yangming is, or Zhu Xi, or Liang Sicheng. And what I feel is that often, but at the same time, they'll know who Frank Lloyd Wright and Nietzsche is. So what I think is somehow, I wish that they would re-explore and tell the world, and in some ways enlighten us through their understanding of where we came from. I say we because I feel I identify with being Chinese now, is where this country has come from. And this is something that I really would love to see more of. The TikToks, the Huawei's, the WeChats, that's incredible. It's an incredible change, but it doesn't mean we ignore what came before this. And what I think sometimes is that I would love for us to start deriving our soft power, this identity, the way we interact with the outside world, from what happened pre-Deng Xiaoping. There's so much richness there. Let's start sharing some of that richness as well with the outside world.
I think that would be very helpful, yeah, because personally, I'm also a fan of Chinese traditional culture. Like China has such a long history, that's a unique advantage to China to expand and work on its soft power and cultural influence. So I want to ask the same question for Cyrus. How do you see the future of Chinese soft power, and what advice would you give to Chinese people who want to promote it more?
Yeah, I really like what Brian said there. I think, we often hear about this past 30 years, this economic miracle. I think there's a lot of great principles that we can learn from the traditional Chinese culture. And that's something that I think is really needed, more in China and also more abroad, because I think when you start talking about, let's say, some Confucius quotes and some really famous, cultural understandings, I think that is a way to help bridge this gap. I do want to share a couple other things as well, because, I've been living now in North America for the last 5 years. I live in Vancouver, Canada, full time, which has a very vibrant Chinese community. I would say it's probably one of the largest Chinese communities outside of China. And what's interesting is as a result of that, in Vancouver, we see a tremendous amount of Chinese language programs being offered by schools. And there's one very elite private school in North Vancouver that is the only school that offers Chinese language from kindergarten through grade 12. And it's a very elite school, very expensive to go to. And you see a lot of Caucasian families that are very affluent that, specifically seek out this school because they're like, well, we really want our children to learn and speak fluent Chinese, because that is, the language of the future. I mean, English is always going to be the world language, but obviously if you are a Westerner that is able to communicate in Mandarin, that will be very beneficial to you. We've seen this from, even President Obama's daughters learning Mandarin. We've seen Donald Trump's granddaughter, speaking a very fluent level of Mandarin. There's always an element that, a lot of successful people, are saying, hey, I want my children to learn Mandarin. And, being back here in America, I'm looking at the school system here, and kindergartens are starting to offer Mandarin programs, and it is something that is growing. I had a very great cultural experience here in Vancouver a couple of weeks ago, where I went to the U.S. consulate to apply for the passports for my two youngest children. And the officer was originally from Florida, my home state, and his wife was from Wuhan. And we started speaking in Chinese to each other. And it was a really cool thing, because here we are, two Americans, both from Florida, living in Vancouver at the consulate, and we're speaking Chinese to each other. And I think that's where, we need to look at these cultural exchanges that is so important. When you talk about the history, these famous Confucius quotes, and then the language aspect, these are great ways that we can build a bridge and be this bridge between these two countries. And then finally, I do want to comment on Douyin one more time, because I did bring that up earlier. It's very interesting, because I do a lot of social media work. We help companies with social media. I have a marketing company in Vancouver that does that. And for example, Instagram started as a photo sharing app. And earlier this year, the CEO came out and said, we are no longer identifying ourselves as a photo sharing app. For us moving forward, it is all about short video content. That is the future of our platform. This is our new identity. That 100% came from China. Your Instagram experience, if you are a foreigner and you like Instagram, right now the Instagram Reels is the very popular feature. That is essentially exactly like TikTok. And again, that was invented from China. And, we've seen very similar experiences. I like to use the example of Airbnb. Recently they started offering these experiences where you can book a hotel in Los Angeles and then combine it with a LA Laker game and then a restaurant, and you have this whole experience in LA. Well, travel companies like that have been doing that in China. C-Trip has been doing that in China for many years. So, again, a lot of influence we see from these tech companies. And this is why I'm very much wanting the United States to partner with China, because there's a lot of great technology, a lot of great history, a lot of great culture that we can learn. It's very beneficial for the future of America and Western countries to build that relationship with China.
Yeah, definitely. I think Douyin or TikTok is maybe the first prime example of Chinese tech export that people know this is something from China, and it's new, it's innovative. In my experience, previously there have been tech exports from China, but oftentimes people in the West doesn't even know that they are from China. For example, in the US, I was in college and there was a bike sharing. And when I asked my classmates, they did not know that bike sharing as a concept started in China, in Peking University.
Right.
Yeah. So I think many times it's important to promote these understandings, and that would just make us understand each other better and avoid more misunderstandings, I guess. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to our guests for coming.